Hello and welcome to Victor Davis Hanson in his own words. This is our Saturday edition where we do something a little bit different. And today we'll be looking at Israel in the middle segment, its wars and many misunderstandings about Israel's history. So stay with us for that, and we'll be right back after these important messages. Welcome back to Victor Davis Hanson in his own words. Victor is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. Please come join us there. The name of the website is The Blade of Perseus. So before we get to the middle segment where we talk about Israel, we're going to talk a little bit about right now, China and the United States and technology and military technology. But recently we had a collapse of a bridge in China that had just been refabricated, and it just absolutely fell down. And so it raises the question of, well, once the Chinese spies get U.S. technology, or non-spies in the case of civilian technology, how well or how good are they at implementing it? So Victor, either military or civilian, that was an extraordinary collapse of a bridge. It was
the mountainside collapse, and that took out the first big span. And people who had analyzed it pointed out that when you're building a bridge across a gorge the key thing is that the entry and the exit to the bridge have to have stable geology, or because they're cutting into a mountain, and they didn't. They had known that it was unstable, and they had just shut it down the day before. But that just begs the question. Then there had been people who had said that the cement was cracking, so it wasn't well fabricated, and then they didn't finish the job of stabilizing the geology on either side. But what's really disturbing is when Donald Trump says he wants to increase the foreign student population from China to 600,000, and I have taught a lot of Chinese students. I don't mean Chinese Americans, Chinese nationals. I don't mean Taiwanese. I mean from mainland China. And almost all of them, if you talk to them, they're well connected. Out of 1.5 billion Chinese citizens, were bringing over the elite of the Chinese Communist Party. And they're very, very wealthy. To be wealthy in China, you have to be connected to a provincial governor or a top bureaucrat. And these kids are fabulously wealthy for the most part. So they're not representative of China, and I don't know why we would want. The FBI has suggested in the past 2 to 5% are actively involved in espionage. When you get up to 600,000, you could be 10,000 people. More importantly, almost all students, when they return, are required to be interrogated about what they saw. And so when you say, well, that's just speculative, Victor. Well, no, just go look at their new jet fighter. It looks like it's a copy of the F-35. Go look at their new carrier. It's almost a Nimitz class carrier. And when you look at the particular helmets of the pilots, when you look at the reflective vest of the ground crews that wave the planes in, they're the same color. It's almost as if they have taken movies of what we do and they've copied it to the letter. And what it means is that we're spending a huge amount on research and development, and then we create these very sophisticated weapon systems, and they leapfrog over that. They don't invest to the same degree that we do. Everybody says, well, they invest more in research and development. Yes, they do, but they still couldn't catch up with us because they're a closed society. But what I'm saying is they come in at the back end and they take the cream off the coffee, so to speak. They just scrape it off and they get the product, but they're not putting the inputs. To make a Nimitz class carrier, it's 80 years. You're going all the way back to the Saratoga or the Lexington in 1936, 37, or then the next, the Yorktown Enterprise Wasp Hornet class, and then you're going into the Essex class, and then you're going into the Midway class. So what I'm getting at is that each 20, 30 years, we learn how to use catapults. We learn how to have simultaneous landing and takeoff strips on the same carrier at an angle. We solve the problem of the conning tower. We developed the technology to make a heavy-duty jet that can take that pounding. We were the ones that originated the nuclear-powered carriers. They're all 11 now, and they can go for 30 years in theory without ever getting docking. So my point is, they just come in and take it. I don't know why we don't clamp down on that when you collate the fact that they're also buying farmland in strategic locations. We arrest students in Michigan that were trying to disperse a pathogen to destroy grain. We saw one 12 miles away in Reedley, California, where there was a biolab run by a Chinese national, and he kind of vacated the place. And city inspectors saw some leaks. He went in there, and there was vials of the most deadly, and all was ostensibly a vaccine factory, but it didn't compute. So what I'm getting is they are always probing there, and I just think it would be much better. I just don't believe in a nation of 340 million people. We don't have very qualified people that would like the opportunity to go to Stanford, Harvard, MIT, and I just don't know why we're taking and training these people, and these universities are right at nexuses of defense contractors, Silicon Valley, Research Triangle, a lot of defense companies in Cambridge and Boston and Washington, D.C. It doesn't make sense.
My suggestion is, though, from using the example of the bridge, do we need to worry about that so much when their implementation of technology is often flawed in the way that we see it? So much so that they can't use it. And so,
because they're on a learning curve. And I'll give you a parallel example. After the opening of Japan up to the west and the suppression of the samurai and the clans and the unification of Japan, at the turn of the century, they sent 250,000 students first of all, they thought that Germany was the rising power and France was. So they sent them all over there. And then they quickly discovered that Britain had the best navy. So then they sent them for nautical engineering to Britain. And then after the war, when Germany lost, then they sent the students more to Britain. It's okay. So, and then they were, okay, just like China is, well, we're not stealing anything, and we're going to have a democratic society, and we patrolled the Mediterranean in World War I for the Allies. And then they started reaching a point where their technology was no longer just emulative, but it started to create schools of engineering inside Japan, copied on Oxford, Cambridge, the Sorbonne. Okay, so then us being Americans, we were asleep at the wheel all during the Depression. So we get into 1939, 1940, and suddenly they're in China. And then they bomb us at Pearl Harbor, and we say, what is this Mitsubishi Zero fighter? It's better than our Wildcat fighter. It's got a radial engine. It's an air-cooled engine. It's faster. It's got much longer range than ours. It has a 20-millimeter cannon. It's destroying our Wildcat fighters. And these early were, oh, what is this? The Yamamoto, a battleship? It's a copy of, it's either a copy of the King George class in Britain, or maybe it's a copy of a United States North Carolina class battle. Oh, no, it's not. The biggest guns that we have are 16-inch. The Yamamoto and the Musashi were 18-inch. They could lob a shell the size of a Volkswagen 25 miles. And then they said, but we invented the aircraft carrier. We and the British did. Oh, wow. The war broke out, and they've got 10 aircraft carriers, and they're bigger than some of ours. And so they were very sophisticated. And that's going to happen because they're not just copying this is a end-term project where they copy the end result of our technology, but they're not stupid. So they are Xeroxing our universities with one big difference. They love DEI only for us. They don't like DEI. They have no DEI where they're involved. They're not saying, oh, we have some people from Mongolia. Oh, the Uyghurs have been oppressed. Oh, the Tibetans, let's give them scholarships and give them special. No, 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 no. It's just total meritocratic. And they play up DEI. They're always doing that. They're saying, well, during COVID, you people accused us of being, it's just like you did with the Yellow Peril, and you put Japanese in camps, and you just hate Asians, and we had nothing to do because you're racist. And you now, the WHO, which they controlled and dominated, they even said that you were wrong. It was a pangolin. It was a bat. And then every time they they send a balloon. Oh, we didn't know what was going on, but you hate Asians, so you shot it down. Oh, we can't buy farmland next to your military bases because we're Asian. They're very adept at that. And so they're making their universities meritocratic, and they like what we're doing. And they're the biggest solar and wind material industry exporter in the world. And they're building 2 coal plants a month and natural gas. And so their strategy is we're going to undercut and destroy all the solar and wind companies in the West, and then we're going to dump this cheap product on them below the price of production, and they're all going to go wind and solar like Europe, and their cost is going to, our California, I just drove today, and there's this Manning Avenue Kentua Creek plant. It looks like a monstrosity. It looks thousands of acres of solar panels and some of the best fertile farmland in the world they took out of production. And I would bet you that it's got Chinese imported solar plants. So their idea is, please get in the Paris Climate Accords. You guys all have to cool the planet. Oh, well, we're going to talk that and make sure they get hooked on our solar panels. And then we're going to go coal, oil, nuclear, because it's cheaper and it's more efficient. And our economies will be cheaper and more efficient. And that's what they do. And I was surprised that the King of Sweden the other day said, did you hear what he said?
Yeah.
He said, why are we doing this? Why are we doing solar and wind from China? Why are we trying to destroy our European economies when it makes no difference when India and China are burning coal and it doesn't make any sense.
In fact, that was a topic for me today, that he was at the Brazil climate conference and all the nations were there, and he said, well, the Europeans are doing all of the cutting back to save the planet and nobody else is, and they're the ones that are polluting far more than
and you know
any
what's going to
European
save us
nation.
from us? It's not that the left woke up and said, well, I'm not sure, maybe man-caused global warming is problematic, or it's only 1 degree, or it varies given climatology is an independent factor in and of itself, in addition to human carbon releases. However, artificial intelligence, it requires an enormous amount of electricity, and wind and solar are not going to do it. We need nuclear plants because we have to be clean and still be green. So Bill Gates and all these people are saying, nah, I just thought it over, and I just don't think we should have subsidized wind and solar. And what the subtext is, I can't make another $1 trillion. We can't make $10 trillion, my buddies and all of us, if we go down the climate after he tried to destroy the U.S. economy. And here in California, thanks, Bill Gates, we pay 40 cents a kilowatt thanks to people like you. And you're going to make a ton of money because all of us, you're going to say that we're suckers and stuck with these ugly solar farms, while you and your AI plants locate right next to nuclear plants or natural gas plants or hydroelectric plants where you can get cheap labor for your vast AEI networks. So that was prima facie that it was all a hoax. When I saw that guy in the Bill Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates, they were the biggest promoter of green energy, and they lectured us ad nauseum. And then all of a sudden, well, I think I was wrong. I just don't understand. And then you start to read, and he's investing heavily in AI. And so the same with all of them.
Well, maybe since his divorce, he's gotten away from it. And why was he divorced? Was that because he was on Jeffrey Epstein's plane? Oh, speaking of
He
which,
doesn't have he's smarter than Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew was more indiscreet. I don't know what he did, but he's on the phone logs of visiting. I don't know which area he visited, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, Victor, let's welcome back the Hoover Institution. And if you listen to VDH in his own words, you care about where America's been, where we are now, and where we're headed. That's exactly what Freedom Frequency is all about. It's a new online publication from the Hoover Institution where Victor is a senior fellow. It's designed to cut through the noise and bring clarity to the issues that shape our country's future. Each week, Freedom Frequency delivers serious, accessible analysis, grounded in research and guided by the American values of liberty, democracy, free enterprise, and the rule of law. You'll hear from some of Hoover's most respected thinkers, people like Condoleezza Rice, General Jim Mattis, General H.R. McMaster, economists John Cochrane, and of course, Victor Davis Hanson himself. The publication provides clear thinking and principled solutions for a complex world. As we approach the 250th anniversary of our nation, there's no better time to dig deeper into the ideas that built America and will determine its future. Subscribe now to Freedom Frequency on Substack. The URL is thefreedomfrequency.org. That's again, thefreedomfrequency.org, and join the conversation that's lighting the way forward. And we'd like to thank the Hoover Institution.
I just came back from the Hoover Institution. And you know what's very exciting right now? I've been there 22 years. Oh, no, I've been there 23 years. But our director, Condoleezza Rice, wants to, it's kind of strange, he wants to make the Hoover Institution's history group better than any history department in the United States, even though we're not an academic institution. So, you know, we have the finest Russian historian in the world, really, of the Stalinist communist era, Steve Kotkin. That massive 3-volume biography is one of his works on Stalin. We have H.R. McMaster, military historian and, national security advisor, Neil Ferguson, Andrew Roberts now, the classicist Barry Strauss, the other classical historian, Josiah Ober. We have one of the best 2 Chinese scholars, Malcolm Yu, or what I call him Mao. He's from the history department at the Naval Academy, brilliant expert, Chinese native, who's now an American citizen for years, Frank Decoder. And if you couldn't have any more of the top historians in the world, we have we're going to bring in another American historian, another military historian. So it's a very exciting time. And you can see what's happening because I'll have students that are at Stanford University come over and talk to me and say, wow, all the famous historians on the Stanford campus are not in the history department. They're all at the Hoover Institution. And that's very controversial, but it's a referendum on our commitment to fill a vacuum in history in the United States. And this is not ideological. I don't know what the politics of the people I just mentioned's name are, but they're not all in agreement with me, I can tell you that. But they're all top-ranked historians. And it's really it hasn't been written about. I hope some journalists will take notice, because if they would look at the history profile of much larger departments, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, Berkeley, and they would look at our small group of 10 historians, I think if you look at the caliber and number of publications, or I'll give you one example very quickly. Google Scholar has a methodology, and there's another rival to it. And they will look at a scholar's production, and they will look at the footnotes and they will count the citations by other academics. Not that it's, it's not a very perfect system, but it gives you some idea of what people in that field are referring to. They do a computer scan, and then they rank ancient historians. If you look at ancient history and you look at the number of classicists that write in ancient history, and you look at their ranking based on their publications and citations, 1, 2, 3 of them are at the Hoover Institution. Of the top 10, and I think 2 of the top 5. And if you look at other areas, it's the same thing. So it's a new thing, and I never thought I'd see it at Hoover. And this is not teaching, it's just writing and encourage. And then we have this junior fellow program where we say, we don't know what's wrong, but there's a crisis in higher education. We're producing too many PhDs and they're not getting jobs, and they're brilliant. It's a tragedy. So we each year try to scan and get the 4 top PhDs if we can get them, and then bring them for 5 and 10 years and pay them a very, very lucrative salary. So we're trying to recapture history and make it in the grand tradition of narrative history. When you read some of Neil Ferguson's books on World War I, or you read he wrote a book called The Pity of War, or you look at Andrew Roberts' World War II book on World War II, or you look at Barry Strauss' recent book on Rome and the Jews, or you look at Stephen Kotkin's biography. They're all great narrative histories.
Andrew Roberts wrote a great one on Napoleon, on
Napoleon, I don't
George
know how he
III.
I don't know how he does it. I've reviewed 3 or 4 of them. I have no idea how he does it, but every 2 or 3 years, he publishes a massive, 1,000 pages, Churchill, 1,000 pages, Napoleon, and all with archival research. I don't know how all of these people do it.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to, since we were on Epstein, and I know that neither of us is really excited about this topic, but there's been so much out this week on Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, and that there were these emails that are revealing. I read them and didn't think there was much to them in terms of Donald Trump did anything bad. So the women that he had talked to or were entertaining him said he was a perfect gentleman, or the one woman that they had on record. And so it didn't look bad to me, but the left is trying to say that it shows he was in with Jeffrey Epstein's young girls. And I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, it's pretty bogus when Jasmine Crockett, whom asterisk, I don't understand why they think she's the future of any party. There was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen in the history of American journalism, such as it is, when that reporter got down and kissed her feet. I thought that was almost sick. She is a racist. She is a upper middle class prima donna who her whole life went, as a privileged person, went to private expensive prep schools, and then she gets in the Congress, for the Congress, and adopts an inner city accent as if she's some genuine persecuted person who's been dealt all of these injustices, and then she spouts off with this generic white person. If you had substituted the word black for white when she talks, they would have censored her on the floor. And it's pretty bad when Wolf Blitzer on CNN has to say, wait, what you just said is inaccurate. And she said, well, the name is redacted. Well, these names were redacted when you had control of the White House. So it didn't come from Donald Trump. And she said, well, she was trying to imply that was a reference to Donald Trump. But exactly, even Wolf Blitzer said, but it's exonerating to him. She has said that there was no evidence that she ever saw that he engaged in sexual activity or even flirted, and that she worked at Mar-a-Lago and her father came there, and there was no. So it went from the shutdown, which we now know, Kevin Hassard had a good point, that it's cost 1.5% GDP, $15 billion a week hit on the economy for 6 weeks. And that's going to lower the fourth quarter. And that thing was only, just to get off on, that thing was only designed for about 2 reasons. 3. One was to shut down the government, cause panic right before the New Jersey, California, Virginia, and people were out of work, and then show that Trump had lost his mojo. And they did. It showed that. They think it showed it. They were all in blue states. And then number 2, Chuck Schumer had refused to do it before when they pressured him, and they were talking about AOC primary, and he thought he was going to, I'm going to get back my fides as the Senate leader of the party. And he shut down the thing, and then they kept advancing different reasons. Sometimes we had no leverage. We wanted to save Obamacare. We wanted to show that we could check Donald Trump. So we risked people's lives flying with the reduced air traffic controllers. We made people not get their public support. We laid off people, but it was all worth it. And then the third, of course, was they wanted not only to Schumer not only wanted to show that he was as radical as the base trying to destroy him, and they wanted to win that election. They wanted to hurt the economy. They really did. And they succeeded only in one thing. They made the economy take a hit so they could say it's not growing. GDP is only 2 or 3%. The Federal Bank of Atlanta said it would be 4% in the fourth quarter. And there's a good article today by Joel Kotkin, and he said Trump better be very careful. I had written an article last week saying the race for the Trump economy. And I'm saying he only has a year. And all of these multi-trillion-dollar investments, it's going to be nip and tuck if they'll have it. I don't know if they're actually going to actualize in time, but maybe they can break ground and build these huge plants and all that, and that might create more jobs. And then the tax cuts and the deregulation, and we're already up to 14 million barrels. They think they're going to be up to 16. So gas could get down to $2.15, $2.20 a gallon nationwide. Not in California, of course. I was just in Atherton, California, driving by, and I saw $6.66 a gallon. $6.66 in California. Can you imagine that when oil is pretty cheap? So what I'm getting at is that's what it was all about. Let's keep interest rates high. Let's shut down the government. Let's get fake news about recession, Wall Street collapse, and let's run on the midterms on affordability.
And that was very good, a deflection. So you're saying all that email stuff, which was exonerating to Trump, has nothing to do with anything but
just
trying to
like
distract.
They just went by and they said, well, we tried that. We didn't get anything, but we did hurt the economy and the American people, and that was the point. What's next? Oh, I know. Bring back the Epstein letters. Let's just get all those But we did the redactions, and we got to be careful because if we let them all out, there's people like the Clintons there, and Bill Gates is one of our guys, and we got to be very, very careful. At this point, I would have the Samson effect. I would just tell Trump, just let it all out. I know there's donors and people who are afraid they'll be tagged by guilt of association. You know, if you saw Jeffrey Epstein, you don't know who he is. He came up to you and he takes a picture with you. If you're naive enough to go on his airplane, maybe you didn't know what was going on. Maybe he didn't have girls on the air, but you would be in the logs.
Yeah. Well, Victor, then let's turn to another unfinished topic, because we were talking about military technology, and I did get your point that the Chinese are on a learning curve, so we should worry because in the future it could get bad. And so I was wondering your assessment, because there's been news out about Pete Hegseth's military and new things that he's doing. And
I think that you're starting to see that the left has expanded all of their attacks on him, and they've got nothing. And in other words, when all of the hysteria dies down, people are going to ask themselves, are the soldiers having higher morale? Are they getting better training? Are the generals who were committed to sociology and DEI? I mean, got to remember in 2013 at Fort Hood, Major Hassan killed 13 people who were unarmed on the base, military, and he wounded 30, and he yelled Allah Akbar. And George Casey, the chief of staff of the Army, said, well, as horrific as this is, it would be even more catastrophic if I thought that some of our outreach programs would be in danger, i.e. DEI and, Muslim. So that was the idea of the Army. You get ahead, and the Marines and the Air Force, you can get ahead if you're a Washington corridor creature, and you say when you go to Congress, or you get to know Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and they get the idea that I'm going to really go after DEI. I'm really going to promote DEI, and then they would put pressure and get promoted quickly. And that destroyed morale. And that's why they were short in the Army in 2023, 40,000 troops. Suddenly they met all of their recruitment. It was amazing. They did it in 3 months. And all the people who had told us, oh, no, they won't join. They're too fat. They have tattoos. They're in gangs. They have better jobs elsewhere. It's a permanent problem. We've done our best. No, you didn't. You weaponized the entire Pentagon and people who traditionally die at double their numbers in Afghanistan and Iraq, i.e., white, suburban, and rural males, felt that if they went into your military, people like Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley, would investigate them and find out, as they promised to do in front of the Congress, to see if there was a systematic cabal of white racists. They found nothing. So now these people are gone, and Pete's got rid of a lot of them. And he's just said, we don't want people who tried to pander for their own promotions. We want people who, if I see a battalion or brigade commander, I want to see if their brigade hit the target. I want to see how many planes landed on the carrier without a go-around. I want to see, that's what they're looking at. And we're going to promote those people. And then it's no longer going to be just, well, let's call in the old generals that retired from General Dynamics and Raytheon and see what they have, what's the new product. Now we're going to get smaller people using off the shelf. So I think it's today they've said they're going to buy or produce 1 million drones. Think of the difference. So you're going to have maybe, I don't know, the Ronald Reagan or the Gerald Ford, they would have their fleet of planes on them, but maybe they would have a methodology to put 1,000 drones on that or the support ships. Maybe they could have the Gerald Ford go in the South China Sea someday and be accompanied by 6 or 7 frigates loaded to the brim with drones. And then when an F-35 took off, he could be sort of like a big king seagull, and he'd have 1,000 little drones following him, and he could direct them anywhere he wants. That's the difference. And I think I've noticed that they're less, the people they really went after were Sean Duffy, transportation, and Pete Hegseth. Everybody should ask themselves, do you think the military is in better shape now or under Lloyd Austin? And do you think the transportation is grid is being addressed under Sean Duffy or Pete Buttigieg? All Pete Buttigieg talked about was DEI, and he left the air traffic controller stuff a mess. And he didn't want to fund highways or anything. It was all California mass transit stuff like that.
Well, he implemented DEI in the training of air traffic
He
controllers,
did.
which
And then
was
not only that, he did
problematic.
something worse. He pressured the airlines to do it. So United Airlines was finally bragging that half of their pilots had to be DEI, and they were not hiring people from the military who, were the best pilots in the world. So they did a lot of damage, and they did a lot of damage on the border. We don't talk. I have only one criticism about the Trump administration, but it's a big one. They don't talk and inform the American people. They need a lot better public relations. They need to say, do you really want to go back to 10,000 people a day? They just started highlighting the type of child molesters and criminals that they had a press conference today. They should do that every day. And then they should say, this is Ellis Island. Remember Ellis Island? Yeah, we haven't had Ellis Island in 71 years. But from 1892 to 1954, for over 60 years, they let in 12 million people. Joe Biden, and they did it legally, orderly, with health and background checks. And Joe Biden let in the same amount in 4 years, completely the opposite. Do you want to go back to that? They should do that, and they don't. And they should say, this is what we did in the Middle East. This is what we're doing on crime. Crime is going continually to go down. And they don't get that message out. They need to talk about the economy. They're going to say, yes, we're worried that we're going to hit 3% inflation, but we've only been here 10 months. And a lot of that was baked into it because Joe Biden raised prices 22%, and it was over 4 years, over 5% on average per year. And you people didn't say a word. So give us a year or two, and we'll see what it is. But they're
I,
not doing that. I don't
I,
know why.
I think Trump tries to do that though, because every time he talks to the press, and he does a lot of ad hoc talking to the press, he does try to highlight the things that he's accomplished in the economy. I think he's
They
started
need
to try
people in
to
the
do that.
Congress. They need people in on the staff. Yeah, he tries
Yeah,
to,
he
but they
tries to.
they
It
need to,
needs
they need to
more,
get
need
the
broader.
message out, and especially to Hispanics, because 55% of Hispanic males voted for Trump, 49%, and they lost that some of that momentum in these blue states, and it was over immigration because the left just caused so much nihilism and threats to ICE, and everybody said, oh, they're going after everybody. No, they weren't. They were going after people, first of all, who were already ordered to leave and gone through the system, and then simultaneously criminals. But if you go into a house or you go to Home Depot and you know a known pedophile is there and there's two people standing next to him that are talking to him and they're here illegally, you don't say, well, I'm an officer of the federal enforcement of immigration law and I'm arresting this man because he's a pedophile with a warrant out for his arrest. But who are you? I need to see your ID. Are you not going to check on their status? And if you find out, so there was 10 or 20% collateral damage. But they need to say that, and then they should run commercials with what the border was like. Just show 10,000 people coming across, and say, "Do you really want to go back to that?" And they're going to have a rendezvous with a very, very controversial question, and that is when you've got 12 million under Biden, and you had, according to the Yale study I quoted the other day, is 20 million. That was in 2019. It's probably more like 25 million before Biden came in. And some of these people who came in, yes, they broke the law. They're culpable. They should pay a fine. They should not get amnesty and citizenship. However, pause. If you say you have been here, say 5 or maybe 10 years, and you have not had any criminal record, and you're not now on public assistance, and you're willing to pay a fine for your transgression, maybe $2,000 or $3,000, and you want a green card, we will give it to you, and you will not be deported. And that might be 5 million people. But you get into the base, oh, no, that's amnesty. Not when you have a secure border. Reagan did it, but he didn't have a secure border, and he gave blanket amnesties. And then even then, only 1/3 took citizenship. So we could do that, and it would really take the wind out of the left's appeal to their argument right now as to Hispanics is, well, he said he was going to deport criminals, but you were on your way to clean some wealthy white person's home and he arrested you. You were a dreamer and you had all of your future as a brain surgeon and they arrested you. And they don't talk about the criminals. They don't talk about any of the people, but they need to deflate that argument and win back that constituency. And I think they can do it if they get more information out what they're doing. And then I know that the hardcore base will say, Victor, you just advocated amnesty. I didn't. I'm saying that you make a person pay a fine and you make a small pool of people eligible to pay that fine based on how long they were here, no criminal activity, no social entitlement support, no citizenship, just green card. Bam. I think you would say, well, there's a lot of people in the Hispanic community that would say that's fair. I broke the law. I've been living in the shadows. I break the law, but I have a chance now. That's a fair shake I got. And as far as the other people, if they don't qualify, that's because they either broke the law, or they're not working.
Well, just one last thing back to the military technology. I did hear General Keane this morning talking about counter drone technology. And I've always been curious about that because when they've described drones on the battlefield, the whole idea of a drone on a battlefield just frightens me in the sense that it could go anywhere and easily kill soldiers. But he said that there's counter drone technology now, and the place that it's being implemented is in the Ukraine. I was
Yeah.
wondering if you know anything
Well,
about
I
that.
wrote an article about our Spanish Civil War. It was about a year ago, and I said from 1936 to 1939, when the Franco nationalist Catholics fought the communist, socialist, anarchists in the Civil War, the Republicans, and Franco won, the fascists did. The Soviet Union poured all this money and arms to the Republic or the communist, socialist, whatever. It's very controversial how you term them. They call themselves the loyalists, loyal to the Republican government. And then Germany and Italy armed to the teeth the nationalists. And so that's when the early Stuka bombers um, came, dive bombing, blitzkrieg. They had the Mark I little putt-putt tank. Didn't even have a gun on it, but they were experimenting with armor, blitzkrieg, and that's how they learned to get ahead. And what Ukraine is now, it is another laboratory. So the idea that, just think how different it is. In March of 2023, all people in the West said, we gave them Abrams tanks. They have German Leopard tanks. They have British Centurion tanks. It's going to be a breakthrough of Russian lines. And I thought that is stupid because they don't have the manpower. Why would they go on the offensive, And so that just petered out. And then we learned that the Russian drones were swarming people. Well, then the Ukrainians have gotten smart now. So sometimes it's just rudimentary building cages over the roads so drones can't fly in, or they're putting wire meshes over the top of the tanks. Sometimes it's sophisticated counter drones that just swarm a big drone that comes in, small little ones. And sometimes it's jamming them. Sometimes they're experimenting, they're asking the Israelis about lasers and sonic efforts to destroy the guidance system. It's and we're learning from that. And it's always challenge, counter challenge, counter challenge, back and forth, back and forth. But right now, drones, what's scary to most people is not the big drones that look like a kite, that have 100 or 200 pounds or 300, and they can go, bomb and destroy. It's these little ones, and, that have maybe 16 ounces of explosive that can hover outside our military headquarters and then fly through the window or the open door and then go in and kill a general or the whole staff. What if you had them in World War II? Hitler is in the Fuhrer bunker when you had Operation Valkyrie. And then all of a sudden a drone flies in there and he lands there like a little insect and blows up. That would have been a lot more effective. And that happened. The Israelis did that and took out a lot more. I am told they took out a lot more high officers and physicists than they let on. And that's one of the most chilling things I've ever seen was Sinwar, the architect of October 7th. And that drone came in and he's in a chair. Did you see that? And it just sort of hovers right around him and he's looking at it and he tries to, and it, it was like a dragonfly or a butterfly or something. And
Yeah.
it was just, he's dead. He was dead.
That's what's so frightening about drones
It's
on the
really sad
battlefield.
is when you look at, gosh, these Ukraine has released these pictures of these Russian soldiers, that get trapped and they're running and they look up and they see a drone coming. Sometimes they shoot their gun at them and they're running, they're hiding in the drone and you can just see them and then they blow up. It's frightening.
Yeah.
Terminator stuff.
Yes, exactly. So that counter drone technology was fascinating to me. So Victor, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about Israel. And after that, we're going to talk a little bit about the Groypers who are followers of Nick Fuentes, the interviewed Nazi or wannabe Nazi that Tucker did. And we'll talk a little bit more about him. But first, we'll do Israel. So stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Victor Davis Hanson in his own words. We are partnered with the Daily Signal, and we're happy in our new partnership. You can also find Victor at his X account. His handle is at VD Hanson, and on Facebook at Hanson's Morning Cup. So, Victor, I know that you wanted to talk about Israel. That's sort of tag teaming with the Fuentes discussion, who is clearly an anti-Semite, and the whole issue of Israel and anti-Semitism in the United States. So it would be interesting to hear the truth about these wars and some of the misunderstandings.
Almost
about
everything
wars.
that we hear from the alt-right is a word that it's kind of ironic because in German the word old is alt. So, and we use the same term for the Buchanan paleo old. That's a Greek word. But so everybody thinks it's alt-right, the old right, old-fashioned. No, alt means alternative right. I would call what's going on now the alt-right, the alternative to the alternative, because these are different even than the Buchanan right. So almost everything that Nick Fuentes and that group says about Israel is untrue. So they say that neoconservatives and Jewish interests got us into the Middle East wars, Gulf War I and II. Okay. Who are they? Well, they usually mention Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, David Fromm, Max Boot, Bill Kristol, right? Yes, they were in the Project for a New American. They wanted to go, but they didn't make the decisions. Who made the decisions, say, I won't go into the first Gulf War, but who said they wanted to go into Iraq? I mean, not who wrote about it or who said they should or shouldn't, but who actually made the decision? George W. Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State Colin Powell, CIA Director George Tenet. No one is Jewish. The Israeli government was asked, do you think we should go into Iraq? No, please don't. Our existential enemy is Iran, and for all the evil of Saddam Hussein, he's a check on it. So they didn't want us to go in. So why did we go in? We went in, and because after the first Gulf War, we let Saddam survive. He broke all the rules. Still, we were going to let him be. And then 9/11 came. And for better or for worse, we said, that team said, we're not going to allow Islamic radicalism anywhere. And they felt that he had harbored terrorists and he was going to try to go into the oil fields like he didn't before. And remember, in the first Gulf War, we didn't go into Kuwait because Israel said so. Israel was, they were sending Scud missiles at Israel. Israel didn't attack them. And we were saying, don't attack that. Don't reply. We'll reply. You can't defend yourself. We will defend, but not you. We're going to attack Saddam. And remember, people ask James Baker, the Secretary of the State, about, he said, F the Jews. They didn't vote for us. So there was that's crazy. So then why do we support Israel? Well, Tucker said that he hated Christian Zionists more than anybody. And I don't know what he meant by that. He meant, when I hear that term, I don't come Karl Rove and John Bolton. I don't think so. I mean, they're more secular politicos, but he mentioned former Governor Huckabee, who's now the ambassador. I am a person of Christian faith, but I don't support Israel because that's the birthplace of the Judeo-Christian. That's something to consider, and I know a lot of people do, but I don't come from it as the alt-right accuses people. Well, they're either a bunch of Jews or they're kind of crazy Christian Zionists and they get us into this war and they want us. No, I do it from U.S. self-interest. So number one is Israel is a constitutional parliamentary republic. They have elections. There's no elections in Ukraine right now. We tell Ukraine, and I'm for all helping Ukraine not start World War III, but defending itself. But They have canceled elections. They have canceled political parties. They have censored the media. We have told them no ceasefires, basically, until Trump came in. We tell Israel, ceasefire, no collateral damage. You have to have elections. So the second thing is, so it is a parliamentary democracy surrounded by 500 million Arab Muslims, not one democracy or parliamentary republic among them. And then you ask yourself, well, we give them all this money, Victor, $3.5 billion a year. Yes, we do, in military aid for 10,200,000 people. That's a lot. However, it's a return on our money because we get a lot of high quality intelligence from their intelligence services, number one. When we give them F-35s, they don't call us up and say it's broken, like most countries. Or how do we do this? They improve it, and then they call us up and say, if you do this to the F-35, it works even better. When we are working on the Patriot system, they said, listen, we have done Iron Dome. Now we're working on Iron Beam. We have Arrow. This is valuable. It's in your interest and our interest. So they share technology with us. And more importantly, as I said before, radical Islamists killed 3,000 people on 9/11. They killed over 300 at the embassy and the Marine barracks. Hezbollah did. The Houthis disrupted international shipping on the Red Sea. Hamas and Iran have killed Americans. Iran's killed probably over 2,000 Americans in Iraq by sending shaped charges to Islamists that were fighting our troops. And Hamas, Palestinian terrorists, has hijacked planes. They've killed an ambassador. We know that, to the Sudan. So their enemies happen to be in this part of the world, our enemies. And they're doing a lot of the things we wouldn't have been able to work. Tucker said, World War III, why are we taking out the nuclear facilities? We're taking out the nuclear facilities so they don't get a missile with a nuclear tip and tell Europe, you're not going to do this and you're not going to do this, because we want to go to paradise and we will destroy you. And we didn't want to have a nuclear exchange in the Middle East between Israel and Iran. So we wouldn't have been able to do that unless Israel had wiped out Iranian air defenses. So we did. I heard from the alt-right that it's a theocratic state. It's a Jewish... No, it's not. 70% of the population of little 10,200,000 people are Jewish. That's it. The other 21% are Arabs. Arabs, Muslims. Do you think that there's a population of 20% Jews in any of these Arab neighbors? I can tell you there might have been 5 or 6% in Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Saudi. There were at one time. And you know what happened? They were all ethnically cleansed. 1 million of them after the 47, 56, 67, 73 wars. There's no Jews to speak of in any of those countries. But there's not just 20%, 21% Arabs. There's 180,000 Christians. So when the alt-right says, well, in Bethlehem, the Jews ethnically cleansed all the Christians and they drove them out. And it used to be 80. No, that was the Arabs that did that. And where did they go? They went to the U.S., Europe, and Israel. That's why there's 180,000 Christians in Israel. And there's only 20% of the population of Bethlehem on the West Bank. It was just a complete distortion. And then when you look at the Druze, there's another 10% of the population that are Druze and other religions, and they're all living in Israel. And when you look at the 2 million Arabs, so ask yourself, would you rather be a Jew living in any of these 20-something Arab countries or an Arab living in Israel? Well, we have the answer for it. There are no Jews in these places, and they were driven out. There's 2 million Arabs, and you know what? They have one of the largest, I think they're the second country in the Arab world as far as lifespan, longevity. They have longer lives, and they are the freest Arabs in the world. You know that propaganda movie, Jenin, Jenin, about how the horrible Israelis destroyed Jenin and all? That was produced in Israel by Arabs. They have Arab studies programs in Israel. Nobody, nobody thinks of that. And then you think, well, the country's dependent. No, it's not. It's GDP now. I think I just looked it up this year. It's $60,000 per capita GDP. It's higher than France. It's higher than Germany, the standard of living. You go there today and Haifa looks like San Francisco around, I don't know, the time they made Vertigo in the 1950s. The streets are clean. It's sparkling. Everybody's happy. It's amazing. And so we get this image, well, we prop it up because we give them, I have it written down, $3.8 billion in military. That's a lot. And I just explained that's a good investment. But the Congress just voted 6 bills. And you know how much we're going to give or have given or will given for we're going to give $175 billion to Ukraine. And we are giving to the dictatorships that surround Israel $1.2 billion to Jordan, 700, $500 million to Egypt, $500 million to Yemen. I could go on, but all of these Arab countries that we are so afraid of that they will inculcate terrorism, we are giving them money, basically to say, stop the radical Islamicism. So I don't know why there's this hatred. So then people are saying, well, there's a Jewish clique, and they run it. 35% of Jews in Israel are not marrying Jews. They're going all over the world and marrying non-Jews, or they're marrying Israelis who are no longer observant. In the United States, the Jewish community is disappearing because people are intermarrying outside their. I want to ask the Groypers, can I ask you a question? If you are an Arab Muslim immigrant, are you more likely to marry someone who's Arab and Muslim? Or if you're a Jewish American, are you more likely to marry a non-Jew? Do you know the answer to that? It's not even close. So your idea of a small clique of these medieval Jews that are doing all these they're running Hollywood, they run Hollywood in the 1940s and 50s, and maybe they're overrepresented, but I don't hear you talk about, as I said earlier, about the NFL being run by black players, or I don't hear you, Joe Biden, talking about the donut shops of America. I go to every 7-Eleven when I'm driving back and forth. I have never seen somebody, I'm telling you the truth, that was not from Palestine or from India running a 7-Eleven or a Quick Stop. I think that's some kind of organized cabal? No. I think that's very industrious people, and they feel they've not mastered this skill, and they're going to go ahead and do it. So I don't understand why we fixate on this group when there's this historic hatred of them, and I know why we're doing it. As I said earlier, we're doing it because this new generation of young males has been treated terribly, and they have been the generation that suffered the most from reverse discrimination in hiring, in admissions to college. 60% of the student body are female, women. They have this weird, bizarre, provocative Victorian moral code our society does, where we encourage people to sexualize themselves. And then when you have intercourse, all of a sudden you revert to Victorian protocols of you looked at me the wrong way, or at the office, or after we had sexual intercourse, you didn't call me, therefore you harassed me. It's bizarre. And I understand all that. And AI is hitting this generation, but it was not the Jews that did this. And Israel is not being supported by the United States because of a Jewish cabal, and it's not being supported by the United States by Christian Zionists that Tucker said he hated more than anybody in the world, more than the Nazis, more than, I don't know, Al-Qaeda. And it's not being supported by any dark group of people in the shadows. It's being supported because it's in our interest. our national defense interest, our interest in supporting constitutional government, or our interest in supporting open and transparent societies, our interest in technology and military technology exchanges and intelligence. It's a win-win situation. And you know what? We spend I think it's in our interest to a point to support Ukraine, but it's 175 billion that we've committed is not 3.5 billion a year. That's going to take 60 or 70 years to match that. And final thing, this is the final thing. When people say, I don't like Israel, but I'm not anti-Jewish. Okay. And then I say to them, why don't you like Israel? Because they occupy land after the 67 war. When they were attacked, they have the West Bank. Okay, so you're really mad at them, but you're also mad at Azerbaijan because they took land from Armenia last year. And you hate the Turks because they occupy all of northern Cyprus. And you don't like the Ukrainians because after World War II, at the same time the Palestinians, you say, were displaced, Ukraine did all of eastern Poland. So all of western Ukraine today was eastern Poland. It was stolen from the Poles in 1939 by Mr. Molotov and Stalin. And it had been Roman Catholic Polish speaking for 1,000 years. So then to compensate for that, we told Germans, not all Germans were guilty of Nazism. We told the people in Pomerania and East Prussia, start walking. And 46 to 48, 1 to 2 million people died. And we ethnically cleansed 13 million people and gave that land that had been German-speaking since the Middle Ages to compensate for what was stolen from the Poles and gave it to Poland. So, Danzig became Gdansk and everything else. And so my point is, when you talk about occupations, then you talk about all of them. When you talk about ethnic cleansing, you talk about what's going on in the Congo or Nigeria and Christians that are being butchered and displaced. When you're talking about ethnic cleansing and expelling people, then you talk about what Egypt did and what Jordan did and what the entire Arab world did to Jews that had been there for 1,000 years since the Spanish Inquisition. Talk about that. But if you don't, and you only talk about Israel, then don't tell me you're not anti-Jewish, because you are fixating on one country and for all of its purported sins, when all of these sins are common to humankind, but you don't mention any of them. Only these. And that selectivity gives the game away. I've heard people say, I don't believe in occupied land. I just don't like what Turkey's doing. I don't like what Israel's doing. I could disagree about the circumstances of their flawed arguments, but I accept that. That's a principled argument, but they never do that. I've heard just a few do that.
Well, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break and then come back and talk a little bit more about the Fuentes phenomenon and his groypers. Stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. So, Victor, one more thing. The Nick Fuentes has millions of followers on his website or on his social media, and I was wondering, that's a large number. It's a small percentage. I agree, but do you feel like the right wing, or especially our leadership, like Donald Trump or J.D. Vance, needs to deal with them in some fashion, and how would you advise that?
They do. They're afraid of splitting that group off. These young, I call them either the alt-right or the lost generation. So they have a lot of legitimate complaints about globalization, open borders, DEI, the transformation in the economies, the corruption of the universities. So I admit that. In fact, I've written so much about that. They pay a ton of money. They leave in school in debt. They didn't get trained. They're not educated like they should have been for the amount of money they spent, and there's not enough jobs. And it's infected my entire extended family. I would call all of them my children have a deal. They have problems as well, my son. So as in the lost generation, it was much harder for that generation. Everybody said, well, they're pampered. They didn't work like you guys did. Well, maybe so, but you can't afford a house today. And nobody, when I went to school, I got out with, there was no tuition at UC. There were just fees. I had no student loan. And when I worked, uh, I worked for $2 an hour and gas was 25 cents. So 8 times the price of gas. Well, gas was 6. I don't think most people are making $50 an hour for $6 of gas in Atherton. I don't think they're making $40 an hour. So as far as the buying power of wages, it's a lot worse today. So they need to address that. But they don't need to get in this big, ugly fight with personalities. All they have to do is say, Trump could give us. I am worried about elements in the conservative movement. But I want to address first, this is why we support Israel. And then just say what I just said. But with bullet points. There is no cabal of Jews. They are the most loyal Americans there are. Israel is not being subsidized by us. It is a dynamic economy. It's got Nobel Prize, and it's in our interest, strategically and militarily. That's why. It's an oasis in a sea of tyranny. Okay, just talk about that, and then talk about, and this is what I'm going to do. I don't think the 50-year mortgage is a very good idea. You're just making peasants, you know what I mean? And you're not going to get full equity. And I would rather say we're going to give incentives for developers who sell owner-occupied houses. Because what's happening, Wall Street and all these investors are buying millions of these homes up for rentals and in long-term investment. You could give an incentive, just like a housing development has certain rules. You have to pay your dues to the home, the the homeowners. I think that's the right term, homeowners. You could say that we're only going to be homeowners. This is a development for owner occupied, not for people to invest in 3 or 4 homes and rent it out. And they have clauses like that, but really stress that, and then deregulate and give to the states incentives if their local zoning laws will encourage housing, and then have a straight talk with the universities. And I think he's doing that and saying, you've got to get your house in order. You've been raising tuition higher than the rate of inflation because you get guaranteed federal loans. You're going to guarantee the loans with your endowment. You do it, not us. And then have some kind of, they're already offering incentives to work off your debt if you work 4 or 5 years, and they have to have a way to get these kids to get out of that stupid debt they incurred, because it was like they bought a used car and they weren't told what they were buying, and the engine was no good. Well, they were told that you got to go to college. They're 18 years old. Your future will be assured once you get your degree. And these guys in the university, I'm not making fun of used car salesmen, but they sold them a clunker. And they didn't read that. They didn't have to sign 18 pages like when I used to buy used cars because I had no money. 18 or 19 pages I had to sign. Are you aware of this? Are you aware of this? Are you aware of the interest rate? This is the monthly. They didn't do any of that. They just signed over their lives. And so my point is, they need to address the causes that make people goipers. And then they have to say, if people in our movement, we're not going to cancel anybody. We don't believe in counseling. But if people engage in extremist activity and hate and racist talk, we're not going to give them a platform. We're just not going to do it. And you can call it whatever you want. You can have any platform on the internet. We're not going to pass a misinformation, disinformation. We're not going to resurrect the Stanford Internet Observatory with euphemisms to go after you. We're not going to do what Joe Biden did and tell the New York Post that the new FBI, Twitter nexus, FBI nexus is not going to allow you to report on Hunter's lap. No. Anything goes. However, We're not going to have you come to the White House. We're not going to have you come to Mar-a-Lago. We're not going to put you on any platform. If Tucker Carlson wants to do it, fine. And if he doesn't want to cross-examine them like Buckley or other people do, fine. But we're not going to have Tucker at the White House. We're not going to attack him. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to say, you guys do your thing. We're going to be inclusive. We're going to build this MAGA movement, but we're not going to have people who hate other people based on their religion, or they're going to make pseudo arguments about the cabal or the conspiracy. That's all they have to do. And then they need to say this. We're not going to do this because the left, that's for the left to do. The left is the people at Harvard at Cooper Union that chase Jews into a library. The left is the people, if you beat up a Jew or assault him, they'll give you a $65,000 fellowship at Harvard. Or they'll make you a grand marshal of the graduation. Or at Stanford, they'll have a guy working that puts Jews on one side. That's what they do. They attack ICE. They are in the university. They are the people that use the F-bombs. We're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to do that. They are the crude people. They are the violent people. They are the people who cancel. They are the people who ruin people's careers. We're not going to do that, but we can be selective. And that's the difference. And I think he needs to talk about that. Because if he doesn't, one last thing, everybody has this idea that because you're engaging in racist hate speech, like Nick Fuentes, therefore you're crude and inept. Because smart people wouldn't do that. Well, smart, evil people would do that, as history shows us. So when you see David Duke or George Wallace or Orville Forbes, that was in my, when I was a kid, or Strom Thurmond in his heyday during the Dixiecrats. Now, he later kind of repented, but when you see those people, they didn't get there because they couldn't speak. You put Nick Fuentes there, and they would be very hard for a moderator. It would take, as I said earlier, Buckley, I saw the debate with George Wallace. He had all the moral and logical arguments on his side. Wallace was just a sophist trying to dress up segregation, saying that black people voted and loved him. But he said it in a way that he was a better debater. His voice was better. His gestures were better. His repartee was better than Buckley. So when you put Fuentes on there, you got to be very careful because you're dealing with nitroglycerin. Now, there are people on the right that can handle him, but not. Tucker has the ability to do it because he did it to, I think, unnecessarily to his old ally, Ted Cruz. So he has those skills. He could have done the same thing when he said, I'll give you one example and I'll shut up. When he said, well, it's Stalin's birthday. He's my favorite person. And Tucker said, well, I'll get back to that. He didn't get back to that. And he smiled. He should have said, how old are you? 27. Have you ever read Stephen Kotkin's biography of Stalin? No? Have you read anything about Stalin and his life? How many people died under his rule? 20 million in the Great Famine? You know anything about the military purges when he liquidated, 40,000 of his top officers? How about the show trials when he got rid of all the intellectuals? How about in Ukraine and the kulaks? Anybody have a horse? Anybody, have a rudimentary tractor? They were enemies of the people, and they didn't. And he would say, well, they didn't shoot them. No, they starved them to death. And they took their homes away, and they let them wander out in the wilderness, begging people to let them in their doors. You have any idea how evil that man was? And why didn't he do that? He could do that very easily. And I don't think Nick Fuentes could have replied to that. He could have taken Daryl Cooper and nailed him to the wall. All he had to have was 4 or 5 facts about World War II. You don't have to be Andrew Roberts to debate Daryl Cooper when he says they firebombed the Black Forest and they were trying to kill German civilians, or they accidentally sort of kind of messed up and they had no idea that when they went into Ukraine, there were 2 million people going to starve to death. That's not very hard to refute.
No. They knew exactly. They were taking all the grain to sell it to get money.
And I am mystified, I must say that, because I was that Tucker didn't have to put me on Fox all those years, and I owe him a debt of gratitude. And I never heard any of that from him. And I followed his career. I met him in Hoover 20 years ago. I followed his career when he was at CNN. I followed his career when he was for the Iraq War, then he was not for. They were both legitimate positions he took. And I followed his father, who was a wonderful man at Voice of America, big supporter of Israel. And so I don't understand what's happened. I even believe that he was unfairly fired from Fox without warning. I think that was a travesty. So I don't know what happened, but it's not the Tucker that I used to see on Fox.
All right. So, Victor, we'll turn then to the California commercial driver's license, and this is the Sean Duffy investigation. And he's found out that there were 17,000 of these commercial driver's license given to foreigners who did not pass the tests and other things that made them illegitimate or and not legally given these driver's license. And I
God, it
was
was some
wondering,
states were having no name on them. They didn't even have a name. So California had 60,000, I think. So basically, if you were a blue sanctuary state, they issued non-domicile licenses, and they had no background checks. So if you were an illegal alien and you were living in Arizona, you just got on your computer and said, which states will give out-of-state residents a license? So I'm just going to apply to the DMV in California with no background check, and they'll know I'm illegal. That's why they created the program. And I'll get a commercial driver's license. And they won't even ask me if I know English or I can read English. And if I flunk their test, I can take it 12 times. I think the guy in Florida took it 12 times. And then they're going to unleash it. So what I'm getting at, the evil that California does or New York does not stay within California. It's all nationwide. So because that's the nature of trucking, and people are driving all over 200,000 truckers all over the United States, and they don't know English. They were given licenses under illegal protocols, and you can see it. You can see it. I drove today. I just got back 200 miles, and I can tell you it was raining and dark. And when it's raining and dark and it's wet, and you're neck and neck you're going 65 and a truck in the middle lane goes 70, pitch black at 5:30 in the morning, wet. And then you look at him and all of a sudden, I don't know, 100 yards ahead, that second trailer starts to swish like it's a dog tail. And then you get angry and you drive up and you look over there. And if he doesn't have his tinted windows, like most of them do, you see that he has a little platform up there and he's reading. And the American trucking industry used to be everybody empathized with truckers. They'd say, I don't know what those guys put up with, because they're great drivers and they've got 20 tons, and some stupid guy will cut in front of them or slam on the brakes, and they were the best. And now people are terrified. It's not Victor talking about this. Every single person I see in California brings that up. Have you been on the thing? Have you been this? They are working on high-speed rail, which unfortunately is 8 miles from where I'm speaking today, and they need gravel trucks. So they're hiring all these gravel double trailer semis, and they come from all different directions, because between high-speed rail and the freeway is my house and a lot of other people's homes. So I would say they go 70 miles an hour, some 65 to 75 miles an hour, depending how far they are between stop signs, with 20 tons of gravel or sand in them. And you can even see the road taking a beating, and they do it, I don't know, every 5 to 10 minutes there's a truck. And it's just like an earthquake. And yet when you drive out and you see a truck way down there, you don't even want to pull out and go, because you know they're going 65 and they can't stop. And then when you see them coming in the opposite direction. They barely fit in their lane anyway, and then they always go back and forth, and you see that they're either out texting. And my problem is, I don't think, and I see the drivers, I don't think they know English. I don't think they can read English. I don't think a lot of them know what street signs are. And I don't think they know how to operate the trucks. They were the best drivers in the world, the American truckers. And
Yes, or have an understanding of the
or
weight of the
care.
load versus how you
I
can
don't think
turn
they
with that
care. When
load. Yeah.
that guy jackknife in Florida, he killed those 3 people. He just sat there and he looked out at the corner of his eye. Remember that? And he didn't even get out and go and help them. He just stood by this. Oh, what's going to happen to me? It was horrible. And so what these people do under Biden and Newsom, and I don't know how anybody could vote for any of these people again. It gets back to DI. Everybody said, Obama the other day said, "Oh, they blame everything on DI. You do this, it's DI. That's because it's the new race." No, it's not, Barack. It's called a commissariat. Anytime you use ideology instead of merit, you get truck drivers that kill people. Not you, because you fly private. But you know what? If you're flying private so much, and maybe half the air traffic controllers were hired under other circumstances than the tests they took or their military training, you may be affected at some point. And so nobody escapes it. When you have a commissariat, you have to have merit.
Yeah. Well, Victor, we're at the end of the show, and so I wanted to read one, because we are at the very end of the show. Comment from your website, and this is by Jim Hoffman, and he was just listening to one of your podcasts with, I think, Jack, and he said, "Victor, I'm always grateful for your sagacious advice, both in your writing and YouTube. And on your YouTube channel, Media Venues. Unfortunately, every time I finish reading or watching, it infuriates me to no end. Nothing against you, Jack, or Sammy, just simply that your common sense analysis just reaffirms my opinion that Biden and his administration have committed traitorous acts that, as always, will go unpunished." And thank you, Jim Hoffman, for your comment. I agree with you, and I get infuriated just sitting here and doing the podcast.
It's very hard to understand how anybody would let in 10,000 people a day, some days, from the poorest, most violent areas in the world, and they would let them in without any background check, no no health check, no tuberculosis, no infectious disease check, at a time when they had locked people down and would not let them out of their homes when they already had vaccinations. Americans, when they drummed people out of the military for not getting a vaccination. And then you see people, they did not know English. They did not have high school diplomas in the vast majority of cases. They did not have skills. They did not have capital. And they had no plan what to do with them, except they were going to fly them at night to regional airports where nobody could see it, and they were going to bus them. And then they were going to unleash them onto the healthcare, the legal system, the housing system. And they were going to tell the American poor, we don't give health care to illegal aliens. And they just lied. Alejandro Mayorkas was one of the biggest liars in public life I've heard. The border is secure. Remember Baghdad Bob in the first Gulf War? He said, and the enemy came in and we dealt with them it was like we sliced them to pieces with our swords and we blew them up, and the skies are falling with the planes. And as he was talking, this F-15 flew over bombing, and he went like this, he was brilliant, he was a brilliant, he could have made a fortune in American advertising, but he was like a Mayorkas. He would just lie like that. And I never understood what the purpose was. In those days, Tucker made the argument that it was the Great Replacement theory, and he didn't think that up. They called him a racist for saying it, but he was channeling Demography as Destiny and the New Democratic Majority, titles of books and articles they were writing. And they were bragging about it. So they wanted a new constituency a lot of people just didn't like the United States, and they thought, we're just going to screw things up. And you're going to have to deal with it. How do you like that? Part of it was the DEI groups their particular tribe. They wanted more people, but I maybe the Wall Street nexus and corporate nexus wanted cheap labor, but it wasn't in the interest of the middle-class American.
No, it wasn't. Well, Victor, I know we're at a hard stop here, so we're going to thank our audience for listening to us, and thank you for all the common sense, as most of your commenters say.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening and viewing. You don't know how much I appreciate it. And we're going to beat this doppelganger, I don't know what his name is, the Victor Davis Hanson show. But we are Victor Davis Hanson in his own words, and we're starting to win that battle.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell him on the mirror next time I see him, be gone, Banshee.
Thank you. This is Sammy Wink and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Signal. Please like, share, and subscribe to be notified for more content like this. You can also check out my own website at victorhanson.com and subscribe for exclusive features in addition.